Mr. Speaker.
Let us pray. Our Father, keep us mindful of the special and unique opportunity we have to work for our constituents and for our province. And in that work, give us strength and wisdom. Amen.
We gave him my books.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Speaker, I would like to introduce two bills today. The first is Bill 253, the Victim of Crime Levy Act. This bill will add a levy on fines given to persons convicted of offences under enactments of the province or the federal government. The minimum levy will be $25, and the maximum would be 25% of any fine not to exceed $1,250. No levies would be payable where a conditional or absolute discharge has been given, where the offense is one in which a court appearance can be waived on payment of a prescribed fee.
The honourable member for Little Bow has moved first reading of Bill 253, Victim of Crime Levy Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? So ordered.
A bill being Victim of Crime Levy Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Speaker, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, the second bill is Bill number 250, the Profit from Crime Act, which would permit a victim of a crime, or if there is no victim of a crime, the Attorney General to apply to the court to declare profits from a crime as such. Once so declared, the Attorney General shall hold such monies in trust to be used to compensate victims of that crime.
The honourable member for Little Bow has further moved first reading of Bill number 250, Profit from Crime Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? Carried.
A bill being Profit from Crime Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Speaker, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill 241, the Religious and Ethnic Holidays Act. This bill would amend the Employment Standards Act to allow an employee to take as a holiday any day of special ethnocultural or religious significance to that employee, inasmuch as the employee would be required to either make up the time or take time off without pay.
The honourable member for Edmonton Highlands has moved first reading of Bill 241, Religious and Ethnic Holidays Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? Carried.
A bill being Religious and Ethnic Holidays Act, introduced by Honourable Member Ms. Barrett, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the first annual report of the Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation for the year ending March 31, 1985.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table two annual reports. The first, the annual report of the Department of Economic Development for the year ended March 31st, 1985, and the annual report of the Alberta Opportunity Company for the year ended March 31st, 1986.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased today to table the 1984 annual report of the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I'd like also to table the 4th annual report of the Alberta Petroleum Incentives Program Fund for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 1985.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table 3 annual reports. Number 1, the annual report of the Alberta Association of Architects. Secondly, the annual report of the Association of Professional Engineers, Geologists, and Geophysicists of Alberta. And thirdly, the annual report of the Department of Public Works Supply and Services.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased today as well to table 2 annual reports for the fiscal year ending 1984-85. The first is the Alberta Art Foundation report, and the second, the Alberta Foundation for the Performing Arts.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, it is today a sincere pleasure for me to be able to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly 34 students, along with their teacher and parents, from St. Mark's School in the Grand constituency of Calgary-McCall. These students are grade 6 and will soon be venturing into new opportunities in another school, we hope. And they are here today with Mike O'Brien and parents R. Koski, R. Ernani, T. Mitchell, and F. Kosh, and F. Edwards. And I would ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, for some 11 or 12 years now, we in Alberta have had the good fortune of sponsoring the Legislative Intern Program. It's been, I think, without question, a great success, not only for members of the House, but for the individuals involved. Seated today in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, are this year's legislative interns, many who will be leaving shortly, and we wish to wish them well in their future endeavors. I'd like to introduce them, Mr. Speaker. They're seated in your gallery, and if they'll rise as I read their name, perhaps at the conclusion the Assembly can indicate their response to their service here in the Assembly. First of all, Brad Marks, Aniko Zoika, Brad Fott, Gary Sandberg, Thorsten Dubell, Karen Duncan, Jennifer Keenan, and Rhonda Jansen. I would invite members of the Assembly, Mr. Speaker, to give these people a good send-off in the new pursuit.
Mr. Speaker.
To you and through you to the members of the legislature, some very interested and concerned Albertans that were quite involved in the last election campaign. These people are here for 2 very basic purposes. First of all, to observe their MLA in action here in the legislature, and secondly, to prepare themselves and pick out their seat for the 1990 campaign. So I'd like a number of our candidates and interested persons, guests, to stand and be recognized by the legislature.
Mr. Speaker, it's a real privilege for me to introduce 28 grade students from the Breton Elementary School. They're grade 6 students. Mr. Speaker, they asked me what a minister does, and I told them some of us are still trying to define that. So hopefully very soon we'll have a better definition. Would they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly?
Mr. Speaker, I too have the pleasure to introduce to you and through you 48 students from our constituency, which are from the St. Teresa Elementary School, with their teachers Connie Pushman and Donna Irons. They are in the members gallery, and I would ask these students and teachers to rise so that they might receive the traditional warm welcome of this chamber.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce a gentleman, a constituent of mine, but he has a closer connection to this legislature in that he is the father of the new member for Red Deer North, Mr. Stockwell Day Sr. Stock, thanks. If you'd rise and receive well.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker. Order. Mr. Speaker, the point of order is the question of ministerial supplementing of questions after the question period. And it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that when a question is asked and the minister comes back after question period, it doesn't afford any opportunity for the person who asked the question to possibly ask a supplementary question, one or two questions. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask of you to consider that possibly those supplementary answers be given at the start of question period, so the person asking the question could maybe ask a supplementary further on, because it seems that the person makes a statement which is almost like a ministerial statement without an opportunity for the questioner to ask a supplementary.
I realized yesterday that the information that was given did happen to go on for some length, and as you have pointed out, it does present a difficulty with respect to asking any questions. I wonder if the honourable member for Clover Bar would mind if I raise from Beauchesne citation 369 that a question of privilege or point of order raised during the oral question period ought to be taken up after the oral question period, unless the Speaker considers it to be an extremely grave matter. I would hope that in future that points of order and points of privilege hopefully will come at the end of question period. However, I've listened carefully to you, and I'd like I will take the matter under advisement and deal with it in the course of the next 24 hours. Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to Minister of Hospitals and Medicare. Mr. Speaker, the Alberta Medical Association is advising Alberta doctors that patients from Ontario seeking care should be billed directly. My question to the Minister is this: what steps is the Minister taking to discourage use of tourists visiting Alberta as pawns in a dispute in Ontario?
Mr. Speaker, it's always been my understanding that doctors in any province in Canada are entitled to bill patients directly who come from another province, either as tourists or visitors. The situation in Alberta is, as it rests today, is no different than it's been for some length of time. The doctors can either bill the health care plan of another province directly or bill the patient directly, and as far as I'm aware, that is not any offense to the Canada Health Act.
Supplementary question to the Minister. Would the Minister not agree that this is a relatively new development, though, that previously it was done between the plans, and this is different? And will the Minister look into this and see for sure that the portability requirements of the Canada Health Act are being fulfilled?
Mr. Speaker, according to the information that I have, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is mistaken in his belief that this is something new. In fact, doctors in this province have for some length of time been able to either bill patients from other provinces directly or bill the other provincial health care plan. In other words, nothing has changed that I'm aware of.
Supplementary to the changes, maybe they were doing that, but the vast majority were done specifically from plan to plan, and they weren't directly billed. And there is a memo now from the Alberta Medical Association saying that they should, in all cases, directly bill. In view of the fact that this certainly doesn't help the tourism industry, would the Minister take it upon himself in this House to look into this matter and suggest that this is a non-acceptable practice?
Once again, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is mistaken in his belief that something different is now occurring. In fact, that's been accepted practice right across Canada for physicians to bill patients directly when they come from another province as opposed to billing their plan, and according to my information, it's occurred throughout this province on a regular basis. So nothing has really changed. There's no crisis in the medical care system in Alberta. In fact, everything's working well.
It's my understanding this isn't happening in other provinces, and it has to do with this dispute in Ontario. My question then to the minister, is the minister saying that as far as his department and the minister himself is concerned, that this is acceptable practice, that tourists from Ontario should be directly billed even if they have limited means?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, the incidence of doctors billing patients directly in other provinces does occur because the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan, of which I have some responsibility for, in fact does pay Albertans for services provided in other provinces that are direct billed to those individuals. So nothing has changed there either. That's always been a practice that has occurred, and a physician has a right to, under the plan in this province or anywhere else, as I understand it, to either direct bill the patient from another province or bill the plan directly.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to direct another set of questions to the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare. And it flows from questions that I asked on Friday from the Minister, and I quote a statement that he said. It said, "Indeed, there can be situations existing in this province or any other where certain services would be billed directly, not covered by health care insurance or extra billed, and you might still probably meet the terms of the Canada Health Act." My question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, could the Minister be a little more specific and tell the Assembly what services that the province now offers fall into this type of category that he's talking about?
Mr. Speaker, we are presently in process of some negotiations with both the federal government and the Alberta Medical Association relative to matters involving extra billing and the outstanding dollars that are available to Alberta from Ottawa that are being withheld because of the Canada Health Act. And while we're in those negotiations, Mr. Speaker, it's not my intention to elaborate on what's being discussed, except to say that there are certain matters involving insured services under the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan that are not required by the Canada Health Act and could be categorized, I guess, as non-medically required services, that we have some consideration of moving to a category outside of the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan. They involve, for the most part, quite non-essential matters such as cosmetic surgery.
Supplementary question to the Minister. I find this offensive that the only discussion that is going on in an important thing like Medicare is between the Minister and the medical profession. Surely the rest of the people of Alberta and this Assembly of democratically elected people should know what those discussions are. My question is to the Minister, is the Minister prepared now to tell us this, because the people of Alberta want to know this?
Mr. Speaker, when we've had an opportunity to complete our discussions with the Alberta Medical Association and with the federal government, and when I've had an opportunity for full discussion of those matters within the government caucus, there will be a full opportunity for members of the legislature to debate whatever decisions we come to.
Mr. Minister, in all due fairness, the government caucus doesn't represent all the people of Alberta. And this is changing Medicare. And my question to the Minister then, he talks about cosmetic surgery may no longer be covered. My question is, how does the Minister intend to determine what types of cosmetic surgery are crucial to the health and well-being of Albertans and which are not?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the process of coming to some decision on these matters simply has to involve discussions that are private between myself in this case and others who have a direct interest like the Alberta Medical Association. The process also has to involve some support from my colleagues in the government caucus before I elaborate on what we've chosen to do in the Legislative Assembly. If there are amendments required to any legislation to accommodate the kind of decision we reach, then the bill will be tabled in the House for first reading and there will be an opportunity for discussion. If there are changes with respect to the fiscal plan of the Government of Alberta, because of decisions we make. Again, those matters can be debated during the course of estimates of the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care. So there will be full opportunity, Mr. Speaker, for the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in his role to comment on whatever decisions we do reach. But the member will simply have to wait until there's an opportunity for him to do that.
Supplementary question. I find the minister's answers unacceptable. Medicare is not a private club between him and the medical profession in this province. And you can debate it after the fact. But my question then to be specific, because there is a lot of people concerned about this, can the minister assure the Assembly then that Albertans need have no concern that this government will remove chiropractic and physiotherapy services insured by the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan?
Mr. Speaker, it's not my responsibility to assure the Honourable Leader of the Opposition of anything. We're in the process of negotiations. I've said in this House that our aim is to make sure that the federal minister is satisfied that Alberta has met the spirit and the intent of the Canada Health Act. The process of that is to negotiate with the Alberta Medical Association, with the federal minister, and consider all the avenues that are open to us. I have no apologies whatever to make for following that line, and in due course the honourable member will be enlightened by what we've been able to agree to.
Supplementary member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Minister, to the honourable minister, is in view of the fact that their chiropractic associations release news sheet says that over 250,000 Albertans avail themselves of chiropractic practice or chiropractic services. Can he give some sort of insurance to the people of Alberta that he's not going to bargain away chiropractic services in order to get doctors to accept, to do away with extra billing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have not made any comments whatever about this matter, and I take no responsibility for either the Leader of the official opposition or the Leader of the Liberal Party's suggestion that something's being bargained away. If they want to continue on that line of thinking, then that's entirely up to them. But there are literally hundreds of items covered by health care insurance that either one of the honourable members could suggest tomorrow that somebody's bargaining away. What we're trying to do on this side of the House, quite frankly, is create a situation where Albertans can continue to have, if they've had for a good number of years, the best health care plan in Canada, bar none, in spite of the Canada Health Act.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister of Hospitals. Is the government considering a review of the premium rates in the province of Alberta in light of some of the problems that may be on the horizon or that they're facing at the present time?
Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm aware, on every occasion that the provincial treasurer and the Treasury Board review the expenditure and budgetary requirements of this government for a new fiscal year, matters of that nature are considered.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister of Social Services, concerns continue to be raised by Alberta social workers facing unmanageable and unacceptable workloads, even facing violence. Now, can the Minister confirm that over the last 8 weeks, 4 out of 6 child care investigators at her department's Fort Road office here in Edmonton have quit because of unreasonable workloads?
Mr. Speaker, that's a matter of some detail in a district office that I can provide the honourable member by checking with my department.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Can the Minister maybe just confirm that the number of investigations performed by child care investigators in the Fort Road office has been as high as 400 in 1 month, a total of over 66 cases per month for each of the 6 investigators?
The difficulty with the line of the question really it is in such detail that it probably has to come onto the order of paper under motion for return. Perhaps you can phrase the question another way.
I submit, Mr. Speaker, to some importance because we are losing the social workers right at the time and we need them most in our society. And if we wait for the Honourable Minister on the order paper, it could go on for months. Well, is the Minister, can she assure the House then that her department is taking steps to ensure that a sufficient number of child care workers, income security workers are adequately or on staff to adequately perform the functions in the Fork Road office?
Mr. Speaker, again, while I can't speak to a specific district office, the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party will be aware, as a result of questions raised in the House over the last few days, that in fact I had asked of all 6 regions for an assessment of the workload, particularly by the frontline workers.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, I must confess I don't see why she can't say that at least adequate numbers have been retained, but maybe the Minister could tell us why she has been delaying a request by the Alberta Association of Social Workers to meet with her in an attempt to resolve the problems currently being encountered by social workers in this province.
Mr. Speaker, when I have an opportunity with respect to a number of would probably range in the hundreds of requests for meetings, I certainly will. And as a matter of fact, I believe that meeting is scheduled for early September.
Final supplementary. Main question, Leader of the Representative Party. Okay. Did you have supplementary? Final supplementary. Member for Edmonton-Calder.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I'm just wondering if the Minister of Social Services is prepared to take action, and when this action will be taken, depending on the results of this information that's coming forward from these regional offices.
Mr. Speaker, some action has already been taken, as I mentioned in the House earlier, with respect to a question, and that is in the Calgary region, and action with respect to the Edmonton region that I believe to be one of the most critical areas is imminent.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Agriculture, and it's with regards to the new funding for agricultural programs. On June the 16th, the Associate Minister of Agriculture indicated that the $2 billion available to farmers under the Alberta Farm Credit Stability Program is in addition to the $1 billion already out in long-term credit through AADC. My question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, can the Honourable Minister tell the House whether existing AADC loans will be subtracted from the $200,000 limit in the Alberta Farm Credit Stability Program, thereby reducing the maximum amount that a farmer is able to apply for?
Mr. Speaker, let me, in responding to the honourable member, indicate at the outset that it's our hope to have legislation before this House very soon as it relates to the Farm Credit Stability Program, and to indicate to him, as we did indicate during the election campaign, that there would be no stacking of the programs, that there would be a limit of $200,000 available to the farming population on a per-farm basis, $600,000 in the event that there was a corporate structure in place, but there would be no stacking. If an individual has a $150,000 loan from ADC, they can get an additional $50,000 under this program. And the reason for that is so that it will have a broad acceptability to all farmers. And then we're not limiting nor allowing it to be stacked, so that it will have a greater participation of farmers in Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the Provincial Treasurer, and it's with regards to the comment made on April the 4th by the former Honourable Treasurer of the province, indicated that the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, particularly Section 10, of the marketable securities, would be one of the sources of the $2 billion. This section presently has $1.3 billion in it, and I wanted to ask the Provincial Treasurer whether the government intends to use this section of the fund, and if so, what precautions have been taken to assure that no loss will be incurred to the province from such practices as cashing bonds or other securities prior to maturity date, such as the loss that took place in 1981 of some $60 million because of cashing a bond at an inopportune time.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that over the past few days and question period since the election, we have attempted to present to the House a rough outline of our plan for financing the Farm Stability Program, the 9% long-term debt program. At the present time, Mr. Speaker, it's our intention to fund that program by borrowings of the government to put in place this remarkable $2 billion program and, of course, the $750 million long-term financing program. We will finance that by long-term borrowings of the government. As I indicated before, Mr. Speaker, it is our intention in the short term to ensure that this program is up and running, to draw down upon the available sources to us, including the money in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, to ensure that the program does get up and get going. But to be very clear, Mr. Speaker, this 9% long-term financing program will be funded by borrowings by the province from other traditional sources.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the provincial treasurer. In the current budget, some $25 million has been set aside for the program. Could the provincial treasurer indicate whether all the borrowings then that will take place will be all of the other monies necessary, the 1.9 billions of dollars necessary, will be borrowed on the open market? And if so, and if not, how much of the Heritage Savings Trust Fund would be in that mix?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I think it's essentially the same question that was asked just a few minutes ago. You have drawn some, you've drawn across the trail some other items which perhaps could be described in the estimates debates which will be coming up very soon, except to say, again, that we will borrow the money and put in place this program to make it operate both for small businesses and for the farm sector as well. We may have to, on a short-term basis, use the existing resources available to the government, including the liquidity of the Heritage Savings Trust Fund and the liquidity of the General Revenue Fund, but we will borrow from a variety of sources, traditional markets, the required funds to put these two programs in place.
Mr. Speaker, final.
The members had his 3 supplementary questions, and indeed the Treasurer was right. It was the same question asked for the second time, and it really does precipitate debate with respect to estimates. The honourable member for Vermilion Viking, followed by the member for... Oh, I happened to be glancing down at the wrong time, did I? I see. I recognize the member for Vegreville. Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture concerning the $200,000 limit on the funding for this program. I've had a number of submissions from individuals and farm groups expressing concern that the limit might not be adequate. Has the Minister any plans or process with which this limit can be reviewed after the program's been in place for some time?
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member for Vegreville, as we indicated during the election campaign just past, whereby we received overwhelming support from the rural population of this province, we indicated we were going to set the limit at $200,000, and it was quite widely accepted. I should share with him at the same time, though, that all programs within our department are constantly being reviewed so that they are very responsive to the agricultural sector.
Supplementary, final supplementary, the member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Provincial Treasurer and possibly the Minister of Agriculture, but the Provincial Treasurer, last week he assured the House that he would investigate the possibility of talking with the banks and financial institutions whether some of these loans could be in a form of preferred shares, in other words, for a dividend where the farmer would only be paying 5 or 6% and taking advantage of the tax laws that allow a dividend to be issued. Has he now had time to talk to the financial institutions to see whether they would put in place preferred shares rather than loans, which means a 5 or 6% interest rate?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to debate fundamentals of finance, but it's my recollection that if it's a dividend and you pay return to the borrower by way of dividend, it's not deductible for tax purposes. And although we're not encouraging the farming community to incur losses, I would suspect that they would rather have the deduction than to have a dividend payment.
Member for Vermilion Viking, followed by the member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address a question to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture. Honourable Minister, how does the Federal Farm Debt Review Board's projected plans relate to Alberta agriculture, our farmers' position, and this government's present direction?
Mr. Speaker, in speaking to the Federal Farm Credit Review Boards, let me share with the honourable member from Viking that we as a government are in favour of anything that is beneficial to the farming population. We haven't seen all the final details or the final thrust that the federal agricultural minister would like to take, but we do have some concerns in that in the event that it does go too far, it could inhibit credit availability to our agricultural sector, and we wish to put that one concern forward.
Supplementary, Honourable Minister, does this review board intrude on any provincial jurisdictions or agencies such as the Agricultural Development Corporation?
In responding to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, let me indicate that we are presently assessing that. But I would like to underscore that presently we, within our provincial jurisdiction, do have enterprise counselling through ADC, plus we do have counselling services through our department, so that in the event that the farming population do face difficulties, we do offer expert counselling to help them relieve themselves of these difficulties.
For the supplementary, member for Edmonton Avonmore, followed by the member for Lethbridge West.
Mr. Speaker, Wednesday last, the Minister of Education told us she wants to be very comfortable with all matters raised by the public before putting a new school act before the Assembly. I want to ask the Minister whether she is taking the same careful approach with implementation of the secondary education policy, and will she be reviewing the deadlines in the action plan published this January?
In answer to the first question, Mr. Speaker, the answer is yes. And I think it's important to note on the secondary policy implementation in terms of its effect on the program this fall with students and teachers that there are only two changes that are taking place. One is to move the passing grade for grade 7 and above from 40% to 50%.
We'll move it down.
The second change is to move away from B options, which are deemed to be less important than the other optional subjects that are currently in place. So, yes, I will certainly be careful and am reviewing the implementation, but those two changes I do support, and they will go through this fall.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. In view of the fact that the Minister will be reviewing the secondary education policy, I'm wondering if she will be looking into the public concerns that have been produced in the early streaming of students based on achievement rather than ability. What safeguards can the Minister outline which will protect against this?
Mr. Speaker, I share some concerns about the streamlining in terms of the way it's been described to me by representatives of the public. I'm certainly looking at the matter. I intend to appoint a public advisory committee made up of major groups within the education process in Alberta, including teachers and trustees and members of the public, to ensure that that implementation moves along well as we proceed with the 10-year program that's already outlined for it.
Member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Supplementary. The department's required component of courses will be 80% according to the Secondary Education Action Plan. What reasons does the Minister have, or will she be looking into what reasons that the department has concluded that local teachers and jurisdictions must be so limited in determining what is needed by their students?
Mr. Speaker, I believe there's a very strong mandate for the implementation of the new basics program, which is basically what the honourable member is asking. Those basics require that the core subjects, as they're called, receive 80% of time. I support that, and I think it's a very important part of the Secondary Policy Committee.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker.
Avonmore, followed by the member for Ponoka-Rimby.
Mr. Speaker, the April speech from the throne indicates secondary education policy will put greater emphasis upon the mastery of attitudes. Can the would the minister assure us what process will be used to determine the attitudes which will be required and the mechanisms used to evaluate whether a student has mastered these attitudes?
That subject is one, Mr. Speaker, that I intend to have the Policy Implementation Committee look at very carefully, and I believe they will do an important review of all the matters raised by the honourable member.
Karimbi, on this issue?
I'll pass for the moment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Lethbridge West, followed by the member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunication, and it concerns Access, the Alberta Educational Communication Corporation. I've been informed, Mr. Speaker, that the regional office in Lethbridge of Access is being closed. If this is true, could the Minister advise the Assembly as to why?
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member from Lethbridge West, there were originally 4 regional offices of the Access Corporation. They were primarily for the purpose of assisting teachers directly in school by showing them the various technologies and products that were available. They are being closed. One was closed almost 2 years ago. The other 3 are being closed in August. They are being closed following a survey that was done of teachers, which apparently showed that about 75% of those responding found that they, or reported that they were able to get the same kind of information now and the same kind of assistance directly through their school boards. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it's an acknowledgement of the substantial change which has occurred in the type of teaching resources which have become available on a local basis, very generally available, and has made this service no longer necessary. I should indicate that 2 phone numbers have been established for the public and for the use of teachers. They are 1-800 numbers, so there is no charge, unlike the 1-900 numbers for which there is a charge to the customer.
A supplementary, Mr. Speaker, for some 14 or 15 years, Access has come under the aegis of the Department of either Education or Advanced Education, and it's now under a new portfolio of technology. Mr. Speaker, could I ask the Minister, does this indicate a shift in priorities of Access and the role of Access from one of educational to one of technology or broadcasting in Alberta?
Not really, Mr. Speaker. The Access Board has on it representatives from of educators, and in addition has a special panel, I guess one could call it a panel or a committee of educators who identify priorities in the terms of the materials that they would like to have produced or resources that they would like to have available, and that is very closely considered. So I think there's a very, very strong and close direction to educators.
A final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, if I may. I believe it was January '85 when Access launched a major television network across the province in terms of content. Is the government or the minister giving any consideration that the very intelligent debates in this legislative assembly be broadcast through Alberta via the Access network?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure I heard the complete question. I missed a few words when I was trying to listen to the honourable member from Lethbridge West. However, I do recall that there was indeed a review of the cost of televising the deliberations and pronouncements of this August Assembly, and that it appeared to be a very expensive undertaking, and that's the reason that it was not done, as I recall at the time. I would be quite pleased, Mr. Speaker, to have the situation reviewed if that is a high priority of this Assembly.
Final supplementary.
If I could just throw it in, I don't know whether it's a high priority of this Assembly, but I think it should be a high priority of the government to see Albertans are well informed as to the deliberations of this House.
Member for Calgary Buffalo, followed by the member for Calgary Glenmore.
Mr. Speaker, a question to the Honourable Minister of Energy. The government agreed in the Western Accord to total gas deregulation, which means a free market between buyer and seller. Would the minister not agree that it is a built-in and fundamental exception to total gas deregulation, where a 15-year supply of gas is required to be reserved for Canadian use so that it can't be sold into the competing United States market?
Well, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the decision of the National Energy Board to come up with what I believe the honourable member is referring to, the 15, which is a ratio between reserves and production, as opposed to having a 25-year surplus test previously, there has been concern expressed in the industry that the new ruling of the National Energy Board is such that they have some real concerns about it, particularly when the reserves are calculated differently than what the previous situation was, or it's expected that the National Energy Board would be looking at forecasted reserves. And so, in fact, the ratio of 15 might turn out to be equivalent to 21 or 22 years under the previous test. That particular concern has been raised by a number of people. It's a concern that we have, and one we intend to follow up on.
Please, supplementary.
Mr. Minister, I also have been hearing concerns from the oil and gas industry about the effects of deregulation. Does the 15-year surplus supply not mean, Mr. Minister, that Alberta gas producers get all the disadvantages of low prices when there's oversupply and none of the benefits of higher prices when there is a shortage of supply because of the lack of competition in the United States, into the United States market?
What was the question the honourable minister had? He made a statement, but I didn't hear a question.
Mr. Minister, why did the government agree, if there is unhappiness amongst the oil and gas industry with respect to the requirement to have a reserve of natural gas for Canadian supplies, and if this affects the total free market which was supposedly agreed to under the Western Accord, why did the government enter into such an arrangement at that under the Western Accord if that does not reflect a free market system?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the U.S. market is what the producers in this country want to have access to. And the industry and both levels of government in entering the agreement wanted the same objective. As the honourable member knows, we've had a surplus and have a bubble of the gas supply in the United States, and market conditions at the present time are much lower than they were in the past. It's anticipated when the bubble works its way through the system, we will have higher prices in the United States. So we want to have access to that market. In the process of deregulation, that was the objective. And we have a number of steps to accomplish before we will be satisfied that deregulation will work. We've had a couple of decisions now from the National Energy Board, one on the surplus tests, and the recent one with respect to the take-or-pay provisions. And our own ERCB will be having hearings related to the surplus tests as well. So we have a number of steps to follow up on, but we still are looking at November the 1st as a date of implementation, recognizing we want to make sure that Alberta producers are not going to be disadvantaged because of the deregulation.
Final supplementary, member for Calgary Buffalo.
Mr. Minister, the government wanted access and the industry wanted access to the U.S. markets. Nobody's happy with the National Energy Board's decision. Oil and gas prices are collapsing. Why is the government not ready to ask for a delay in deregulation of gas prices, as was suggested by former Premier Lougheed, who was one of the authors of the Western Accord?
Well, Mr. Speaker, certainly there are those who are suggesting that that we do delay beyond the date of November the 1st. There are also a number of people in the industry, including some of the umbrella organizations, who are saying that we should proceed to work towards that date. And if we can't accomplish what we want to accomplish by that date, then for us to consider moving beyond that deadline. I intend to have discussions with my provincial colleagues in Saskatchewan and British Columbia, and also the federal minister, to assess the situation and then decide whether or not we should proceed at that time or delay.
Supplementary, member.
Energy. In this deregulated environment, what specific steps does the minister intend to take to assure that the vital interests of Alberta gas consumers and homeowners and the petrochemical industry is protected?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in terms of who the member wants to consider, is it the Alberta consumers? Is it the producers? In the province of Alberta, we have an unregulated market in terms of that sales can be made and purchases can be made in Alberta if agreements can be reached between the producers and the consumers. And that's the whole intent of deregulation, so that we can have a marketplace so that people can look around for the best deals possible.
Member for Calgary Glenmore, followed by the member for Clover Bar.
To the Honourable Minister of Hospitals and Medicare, I would like to ask the question in regards to the present status of the upgrading of Calgary General Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, in early 1984, the government granted approval for Calgary General Hospital to plan for a capital project that would substantially upgrade the existing hospital. In January, I believe it was, of 1985, it was indicated to the hospital that that project should be contained within limits of $100 million for the total upgrading. The board of the Calgary General Hospital in March of this year submitted the parameters of their project to the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care with an indication that the total project would cost in the neighborhood of $140 million. That total project, as was submitted then, is currently under review by officials in my department.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. When will this review be completed?
Mr. Speaker, I would expect that the review would be completed by the end of August.
Member for Clover Bar. There.
You tell him, Yogi.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to address my question again to the Solicitor General, and I'd like to ask the Solicitor General if he's had the opportunity to find out why a $600,000 tender was let for renovations to the old Ford institution in light of the fact that we're building a new $44 million correctional institution in Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, I should have been more adept yesterday at referring the honourable member to the Minister of Public Works, who has jurisdiction on tendering. If I may, he may wish to respond to it now.
Mr. Speaker, the $609,000+ contract that the honourable member is referring to is a contract that was awarded in February of 1986, will be completed in August of 1986. The purpose is to comply with the fire marshal's requirement on the existing institution and some building code requirements. so that we can continue to operate the facility safely for at least 2+ years.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the Minister. In the question of site selection, can the Minister of Public Works indicate what consultation took place between the Minister's Department and the citizens of Fort Saskatchewan as to the selection of the site of the new institution?
Mr. Speaker, consultations took place between the Department of Public Works, Supply and Services and, of course, the Solicitor General's Department, who we were doing the project for. Consultations also occurred between those two parties and the elected representatives of the City of Fort Saskatchewan. Public hearings were conducted on the development permit by the City of Fort Saskatchewan, so as near as I can determine, there was full opportunity for input.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, can the Minister indicate then what the future is of the present institution when the institution is vacated to move into the new area? What will become of that property at the present site?
Mr. Speaker, that has not yet been finalized. The City of Fort Saskatchewan has expressed an interest in the land on which the existing institution is located. Discussions have been occurring between officials of the city and members of my department. I have a meeting at 7:30 tomorrow morning with the Mayor of Fort Saskatchewan and some of his official staff dealing with that exact matter.
Supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, is the Minister actually going to go ahead with that cost to taxpayers' money in view of the fact that the constituency did not vote for a government member?
The period has expired. Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, the government will accept question 137. I would move that question 132 and motions for return 145 stand and retain their place on the order paper.
Having heard the motion by the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader, would the members in favour of the motion please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion is carried. Could we ask for a bit of order in the press gallery, please?